This series contains adult language and includes content that some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is strongly advised. From Murder Creek Media, this is Skeptical. I'm your host, Neeli Faulkner. This is Season 1, Episode 4. If you're just now tuning into Skeptical, this is one story told week by week. So if you haven't listened to our episodes in sequential order, go back to Episode 1 and start from the beginning. Last week on Skeptical.
What really pissed me off was the two court-appointed monkeys who wouldn't know their backside from a hole in the ground. They were asked, why didn't you push about the fact that Daniel could not have gotten to the crime scene in time?
Let me ask you about Mike's life insurance policy. Were you aware that he had a life insurance policy and that you were the beneficiary of that policy?
When I lived with him, yeah. He told me.
How much was the policy for?
To be honest with you, I couldn't tell you.
You don't remember if it was like $50,000, $100,000?
Well, all he told me was he made a promise to my mom that I'd be taken care of. That's all he ever told me.
He just done it, man. He done it. And see, there was some special investigators there, and they came to me, man, they just hugged me, and they said, man, we just knew he was going to get away. But they had so much more evidence that pointed out that he actually done it, but some of it wasn't admissible to court. What happened should have happened. It should have went down just like it did.
Tony, I'm Agent Thornton. This is Officer Anderson, okay? The time is 12:05 a.m. Today's date, Wednesday, March 22nd, 1995. At this time, Mr. Quinn, I'm going to advise you of your rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court or other proceedings. You have the right to talk to a lawyer for advice before we ask you any questions, and to have him with you during questioning. If you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be appointed without cost to you before any questioning if you wish. If you decide to answer questions now without a lawyer present, you will still have the right to stop answering at any time you wish. Mr. Quinn, do you understand these rights I bear to you, sir?
It's March of 1995. Tony Quince was just 20 years old as he sat in the Chilton County Jail on drug charges. Tony was no stranger to arrest, as he'd been arrested many times for an assortment of crimes, ranging from resisting arrest to assault on an officer, all before he was even 18 years old. By far, his most common arrest prior to this was for possession and distribution, being charged with 6 counts of a sale of a controlled substance in an 18-month sting operation in Chilton County in October of 1994. It's true, Tony was a well-known drug dealer, but he was also known to be a very talented basketball player just a few years prior, frequently cited in the Montgomery Advertiser for points scored in each game. He had attended Verbena High School, the same high school where Mike Bernos worked as a teacher and coach. I spoke to one of Tony's teachers, Stephanie Room. Stephanie had testified that she had seen Mike Bernos at Walmart shortly before his murder, helping to nail down Mike's time of death. When I called her, I asked about Tony and a few of his friends, particularly 2 friends by the name of Jason Posey and Aronde Ziegler. They weren't only Tony's friends, but also his cousins, and they had a pretty rough reputation around the area.
Did you know Tony from school?
Yes, I did.
Was he kind of known as, somebody
Troublemaker, kind of, yeah. Yes, he was.
So you weren't surprised when it was him?
No, I was not. But the Daniel, I had never even, I'd only maybe seen him once or twice when he came by the school, to talk to Mike in the afternoon or something. But I didn't really know him.
Tony's younger brother, Jerry Cohen, did you teach him by chance?
Now that kind of sounds familiar, but I'm not positive on that one.
A couple other names, maybe Jason Posey or Aronde Ziegler. Did you teach
Yes, both of them. Mm-hmm.
Did they kind of have the same reputation as Tony?
Yes. They're kind of the type that would run down the hall to see if you would tell them to quit running or if you were scared of them or not, and wouldn't say anything to them. You know, they would just do that in front of you just to see whether you would discipline them or whether you would ignore them because you were scared of them. Right. I mean, that's kind of what they would do.
You think maybe because of gang activity that people, were they known to be violent or anything like that?
I don't know about being violent. I think they were just known to be into drugs and stuff. And I think they were trying to be really intimidating. So some violence, you could kind of tell, because they tried to intimidate. Just like I said, like by making you see if you would say something to them or not. They wanted to see who they could mess with and who they couldn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Although he sat in jail on drug charges unrelated to the Mike Bernos case, he was already being considered a suspect in the murder. Witness statements taken by ABI agents include comments stating that Tony's name was being talked about in connection to the Bernos murder only a few days after Mike's death. Even Tony's younger brother, Jerry, admits this during his grand jury testimony. As Tony sat in the Chilton County Jail, two undercover officers, Agent Robert Thornton from the ABI and Cedric Anderson of the Auburn Police Department, posed as drug dealers and were placed in the same cell with Tony. They were hoping to get Tony to speak about the Bernos murder and his possible involvement. Officer Thornton, who was wearing a wire, engaged Tony in general conversation. He and Officer Anderson told Tony they were big-time drug dealers, bringing in up to $6,000 per day. When Tony told him he had been arrested on a drug charge, the officers suggested he come to work for them in order to increase their drug profits. Most of this audio from the wire that Robert Thornton was wearing is extremely hard to make out, but I caught a few phrases here and there. During this conversation, Officer Anderson tells Tony that if he wants to join them, he needs to tell them about anything he's done that they may need to know about in order to protect him. Initially, Tony says there's nothing to tell, but after being pressed on it, he mentioned random names of men he had killed, including Mike Bernos.
Mr. Quinn, do you understand these rights I bear to you, sir? Can you read, sir? Can you read? I want you to read this for me, please, Mr. Quinn. I want you to read it out loud. Mr. Quinn, read this out loud, please.
I have been authorized of all my rights, and I understand what my rights are. I am willing to make
Excuse me?
I don't want to talk about what y'all talking about. I got my lawyer.
You don't want to talk to us unless you have your lawyer present.
I can ask you that without the lawyer present. Do you understand why you're here? Okay. Placing you under arrest for the capital murder of Michael Bernos. Do you understand what you're charged with?
Shortly after midnight on March 22, 1995, Tony learned the two dealers weren't dealers at all, and that because of his confession, he was being placed under arrest for the murder of Mike Bernos. Like in Daniel's trial, Tony's case went to trial with little physical evidence besides his confession. After only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a guilty verdict. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on August 8, 1996. Although Tony had confessed to murdering Mike, I had trouble believing his confession. There were several inconsistencies in his statement that didn't match the facts of Mike's murder. For example, when asked by Officer Thornton if anyone else was involved, Tony said no, he had killed Mike alone. If this was true, how were Tony and Daniel ever tried as co-defendants? This was also a point made by Dole Fuller during one of our calls.
There's one thing that jumped out at me, and this is the biggest thing I tried to help him with. Somehow we discovered that there were two undercover law enforcement officers who went into the jail or prison or wherever it was, where a fellow named Tony Quince was incarcerated. They were pretending to be fellow inmates, and Tony Quince told them that he was the one that actually committed this murder and never implicated Daniel Blan in it at all. And the records that I am able to see lead me to conclude that at that time, his lawyers knew about these two police officers and didn't call them as witness. And I sought a new trial and post-conviction relief on his behalf, alleging ineffective assistance of counsel for not calling these two exculpatory witnesses. And for the life of me, to this day, I don't know why they didn't call. I certainly would have.
If Daniel was involved, why would Tony not mention this? This caused me to question the veracity of Tony's confession, especially considering that based on the autopsy, the likelihood of two shooters was extremely high.
He was shot I think it was 15, 16 times. So it had to have been two shooters at least. That's what had to have happened, was that they did sneak up on him. And one of the wounds, I can't remember if it was his left or his right elbow, that he had put that up as a defensive move. So they basically snuck up on him cowardly and took him like that. And then supposedly, from what I understand, they moved his body, they didn't pick his body up and move it anywhere. He was still in his recliner chair, but they stole his wallet. And so that's, I guess, what made it a capital murder case, because then the wallet was recovered in a different location by a little girl. Was not little girl, but I'm old, so I call little girl. A young girl was out walking, and I guess she found the wallet on the side of the road, and then she took it back home, and one of her parents called the police about it. So that's how the wallet was recovered, because they probably weren't even thinking that would even be found. That's what made it into a capital murder case.
In the autopsy sketch, the medical examiner noted 15 entrance or exit wounds beginning from Mike's front side, then left, then a single bullet wound on the top of his head. Firearm and toolmark examiner Ed Morand from the Alabama Department of Forensic Science testified that he had tested and identified bullet fragments from Mike's body as belonging to two different weapons, a .22 and a .38 or a .357 caliber pistol. Morand said, depending on the weapon, bullets from a .38 could also be fired from a .357, so he couldn't say with certainty which type of gun was used. It wasn't just the lack of Daniel's name, but also the witness statements that told me Tony's confession may not be true. I was most skeptical about a statement made by a man named William Price. Price's testimony and statements prior to the trial are important to the story because they tie Tony and Daniel together through the sale of an altered firearm. Remember I told you about on May 24th, 1995, Daniel was arrested for altering a firearm? Well, the arrest report stated Daniel had sold a Brico Arms .380 caliber pistol with a serial number removed to a cooperating individual in Clanton, Alabama on July 27th, 1994, the day Mike was murdered. In order for you to believe this story, you have to take into consideration a lot of hypotheticals, because it requires you to believe that Daniel was arrested on a gun charge through what is essentially a butterfly effect. What I'm about to tell you is pretty confusing, but I'm going to break it down for you the best I can.
Speaking of your arrest, tell me about the gun arrest. Did you sell a gun to somebody, or?
No, ma'am. Never got arrested. They never really arrested me except for when they come up and arrested me for altering a firearm. Danny Hester and somebody else arrested me for altering a firearm. I remember when they arrested me, I was in a convenience store. And when they arrested me, it was 11 o'clock at night. And I just got finished smoking a bowl of weed. And some dude come in and said, hey, I need to talk to you. They said, hey, you under arrest for I forgot what they actually said. And that's when they arrested me for altering my firearm in Chilton County. They supposedly said I traded it for, I was supposed to trade it for drugs and stuff like that. And I told them, I said, look, I don't need to come from Birmingham to down here for drugs. First of all, my brother, my sister, are drug addicts. They're like, huh? I'm like, yeah, I can get any kind of drug I want from them. If you name it, I can get it from them. I said, I don't have to travel nowhere to get anything. I said, I've seen what the drugs they done to them. I've seen what it's done to them, and I don't want no part of it. I said, the only thing I actually do is smoke marijuana. So they said, well, we got you charging somebody saying you should turn this gun into some drugs. I was like, no. I said, no, I've never done that. You know what I'm talking about?
So you didn't know this guy?
Know who?
The guy that you supposedly sold the gun to?
Him and people they talk about, no. I've never lived in Chilton County. I was never from Chilton County. I was never from Urbana.
Well, I guess I'm trying to look through the letter here to see. You had mentioned somebody. Where's the other letter, John? Is this it?
Yes, this is it.
You mentioned somebody in the letter that got arrested, or that said that you sold a gun to him.
They said I tried to sell a gun to William Price.
Yeah, William Price is who you mentioned in the letter. So it said the police confiscated. Do what?
They said they probably got the gun from him or something like that. I really don't know how that went about, but they saying, okay, here's what they're saying. Okay, I'm gonna use me, you, Josh, Christine, and Mike. I'm gonna use all stuff, okay? Okay, they said I came to you with this gun, all right? You knew somebody that had the supposedly drugs I wanted. So I gave you the gun. You went to this person. You went to Josh with the gun to get the marijuana I wanted. Josh didn't have it at the time. So Josh told you to hang on, let him see the gun. He's going to carry it through Christine. Because he knew Christine would have it. So he carried the gun to Christine. Christine didn't have it. She knew that Mike had it. So she got the gun from Josh and took it to Mike. Mike's like, yeah, I want the gun. Here's what you was on. So she got it, gave it to Josh. Josh gave it like you, and you gave me supposedly the weed on one. So they saying that gun went to 5 different people.
Right. So it wasn't ever directly connected to you.
No, ma'am.
I don't know this for certain, but I believe Price may have been a confidential informant because of many statements he gave to police over the course of several months, all of which were concerning the murder of Michael Bernos. In a statement he gave in April of 1995, Price told Agent Danny Hester that he had purchased a .380 caliber pistol from a guy named Butch Browder. He claimed he bought this gun between 10 and 11 p.m. on the same night Michael Bernos was killed. Price said that during the purchase of this gun, Browder told him he had bought the gun from someone he referred to as the coach's son. Once Price realized the gun he purchased had the serial number removed, he sold it to another guy, Joe Robertson, who then lended it to his friend, Timothy Atchison. Atchison was later found to be in possession of the gun, and it was sent to the crime lab to be tested. It's important to note that despite Daniel having been arrested for this, no one else, including Atchison, who had the gun in his possession, was ever arrested, and the gun itself has since vanished. The gun was never recovered.
Right.
Okay. But Danny was arrested probably about a year after the murder for supposedly selling a gun, a .357, that had the serial number scratched off, right? But the thing was that he was never in possession of that gun. This is why this statement comes into play.
Right.
Because when I asked Danny about this gun, he said, they said that I sold a gun,
right,
but I didn't sell a gun. Because person A had the gun and they gave it to person B, or sold it to person B. Person B sold it to person C.
And then person C sold it to person D. Well, person D, when they got arrested with it, who they testified against him at trial,
Said that he got it from him.
That he got it from him.
Okay.
And that all these other people, that they had gotten it through him, so it had been sold several times before it got to him. But there was no proof of that. The only proof was this guy's statement saying that it had come from him. There was absolutely no proof of it, and they didn't, to my knowledge, they didn't even have the gun. And the reason that's suspicious to me is because we know that officers were going undercover, trying to get any information that they could out, and after looking through all this evidence, it seems to me like this is a completely made-up charge that they just made it up.
It was.
I don't believe he ever had the gun, or a gun in general, and I don't believe he sold a gun.
They were trying to intimidate him when they brought him in on that charge. They were trying to intimidate him into pleading guilty to that, and they told him that they would knock it down to a misdemeanor. It wouldn't be a felony if he would plead guilty, and he wouldn't serve any jail time. But that was them trying to manufacture some evidence against him to tie him to the murder.
Let's think about this for a moment. Price gives a statement about a gun that he had bought a year earlier, but is somehow able to give specific details about the conversation. And though there is a grapevine of the sale of the gun, Daniel is the only one arrested for it. There's documentation that shows the gun was received and sent to the lab for examination, but from what I can tell, nothing ever came of it. And of course, the gun charge was eventually dropped. During an early trip to the Coosa County Courthouse, I made a request to Judge Rochester to look through the evidence presented at Daniel's trial. Officials in Coosa County were overwhelmingly helpful during my investigation, and they agreed to let Josh and I take a peek into the evidence in a secured office with a witness. I expected large poster boards and photos of maps reminiscent of a television crime drama, but what we found was simply a small file box half full with mostly documentation. Inside it was also a small blue box with a red exhibit sticker on it, an empty Bryco .380 caliber pistol box. This tiny box was pivotal to the prosecution's theory because it's the only piece of physical evidence that connects Daniel to Tony. After Tony's confession, officers conducted a search on Tony's home and located the box, stating the gun that had been in that box was later sold by Daniel to William Price, and henceforth the grapevine of the sale of the gun to Timothy Atchison continued. I might be willing to accept this extreme grasping at straws and assume that Tony having the gun box and Daniel selling the gun was plausible if they ran in the same circles. But it turns out Daniel and Tony had never even met prior to the trial.
Can you tell me how you knew Tony Quince? How did you meet him?
My first time ever meeting Tony Quince?
Uh-huh.
I was sitting in the, you've been in a courtroom, right? Alright, and you know how they get the people that's been convicted of crimes and stuff, they make them sit up there with the jury there, right?
Uh-huh.
And that's my first time ever meeting Tony Quince.
Was that the trial?
He was. He was sitting right in front. And now, it's like when we did sentencing. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, at the sentencing. Okay.
When we were getting appointed and all this stuff like that, he was sitting right in front of him, and I didn't even know it. The second time I talked to him was at West Jefferson when I walked through a door, and I had a vision. You know what I'm talking about? I had a vision of seeing him, and I believe in God, really, right? And he gives me, he lets me know things. And he gave me a vision where I walked through the door and I was going to a softball field, right? And I just blew it all, right? The deja vu came up. And I saw him walking out the door. So I done what I was supposed to do. So I walked over to him and said, hey, I don't know if you committed the crime or not, but the only reason I'm doing this because I was urged to do this, and I apologize. You know, I said, I forgive you for whatever you've done, for whatever access, or whatever you've done in this. You know, so I want you to know that I don't hold nothing against you. I said, this is all I got to say to you. And I just walked off.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It really is. To only know him at sentencing. To first meet him at sentencing and then meet him the second time at the courthouse, that's something. That's really interesting.
In a future conversation with Tony, he told me the same thing, that he and Daniel had never even seen each other prior to the trial. Anyone I spoke with, including Tony's younger brother Jerry, mimicked this same sentiment.
I'm just wondering, do you know Daniel Blan?
No, I don't know Daniel Blan.
I mean, you knew of him.
Right? My first time. That's my first time hearing it was a co-defendant, for real.
Was during Tony's trial or after?
No, when you just said it a while ago.
Oh, okay. So in 20-something years, you didn't know. Oh, wow.
No.
So I'm going to assume you've never met him or anything like that?
No, ma'am.
And Tony's never talked about him?
No, ma'am.
So you just kind of threw a wrench in my questions there, if you don't know. I'm just kind of baffled as to how both of them were convicted of the same crime and neither one of them knew each other. Or
yeah, I don't understand that either. I mean, when you just told them it was a co-defendant and they both got convicted of the same crime, but they evidently, if they got convicted at the same time, they had to be there at the same time. I mean, I don't understand it. I mean, it's just making me more and more like my brother didn't do that.
Even if Daniel and Tony did know each other, Tony seemed to have a legitimate alibi. During grand jury testimony, Jerry, Tony's brother, said that Tony had been with him the night of the murder at a local club called Pops. Jerry says Tony picked him up after Tony had gotten off work from a place called Stewart's Construction Company to take him to buy some shoes. They didn't have any money, so they met their mother at a place in Clanton called Peach Park to grab some cash from her. Then they headed to West End to shoot dice at Pops before heading to buy some shoes. When asked who was at Pops with him, Jerry said he couldn't remember the name specifically, but he estimated there were probably 7 to 12 people present.
So I just want to ask you real quick about your testimony. In your transcript, you said that the night that Michael Bernos was murdered, that you and your brother were at a place called
At a party.
Pops.
At a party. Pops place, the club, yeah.
Is this, were they open or was it normal to just stay outside?
Yes, it was a party. It was a party. It was a club. It was a club that night. It was a party. We went to the club. And I remember it because I had to go back and meet my mother to get some money to get in the club.
Did you meet her at Peach Park? Do you remember?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm going to assume that she was at work, and after she got off work, you met her.
No, I mean we had left the house, and I called and we went back and met her and got some money. She was actually at home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you went. Is this like a usual thing that you and your brother and maybe some friends would go and shoot dice at this place?
Yes. Yes, ma'am. That was the thing we did.
How far was this Pops place from your house?
Approximately 10 miles, 10 to 12, 15 miles.
Oh, okay, so not very far. Do you happen to remember any of the people that were there with you that night besides your brother?
My cousin, Randy Ziegler, was there. I can't remember too many other people. It was just a club, something we do every weekend.
Every
weekend.
Okay. Yeah.
This story was echoed by several witness statements, leading me to believe that Tony had been at Pops playing dice, not in Rockford committing murder. Did Daniel and Tony know each other? This is a question I've thought about so often, trying to figure out if Daniel really was telling the truth about knowing Tony. Because if he didn't, it told me that investigators really had to reach to connect the dots. But if he did know Tony, that meant he had been lying to me this entire time. Then, a few months into my investigation, I received some information that told me Daniel was probably telling the truth about not knowing Tony. This information, this new evidence, had the ability to change the entire story. Next week on Skeptical.
And every time you recall the real memory, you might remember more details, but what you remember is not going to change. You'll just remember maybe more details. When you're trying to pull up the memory of a lie, the details are going to change because your mind does not store it the way that a real memory would be.
Let's assume that he's not able to do a habeas corpus, but say there was new evidence that was presented in his case. Could you at that point do another motion for a new trial based on new evidence?
It would have to be something that impossible for him to find out.
Richard Edge wouldn't have said anything if he wouldn't have gotten a deal. Richard Edge was looking at 4 life without parole sentences and 300 and some years added on top of it.
Lord of mercy.
Skeptical is a production of Murder Creek Media. It's created, written, and narrated by me. Our associate producers are Emily Christie, Tony Forbes, Camry Council, Lauren Powell, and Chantrice Martin. Special thanks to Bailey Dollar and Clarissa Rambo. You can find out more about us and our work by visiting murdercreekmedia.com. If you're hungry for more, consider joining our premium subscription on Spotify. Unlock exclusive access to unaired content, including extended audio interviews and host commentary, offering a deeper dive into the cases that grip your curiosity. You can also join the conversation online by searching our social handle, SkepticalPod. If you like this episode, we'd love to hear from you. Leaving a review helps us grow and improve, making sure we can continue to bring you the content you crave. Every rating, comment, and share helps others discover our show. Remember, every voice matters in the pursuit of justice. Keep questioning, keep advocating, and together we can make a difference.